Now, I know what some of you must be thinking after seeing the title. Haven't I already talked enough about this song? A 20-minute reaction video, a couple more minutes on it during that other Bumblebee video I did. How much more could I really have to say about this one 3-minute song? Well, a lot actually. You see, in those other videos, I'm not sure I had everything quite figured out just yet, but after obsessively replaying this song and studying it closely, I finally feel like I have it all pretty much sorted out. My discovery? Well, ultimately that this song, despite what some bitter people on the internet will tell you, is not only undeniably a song about the Bumblebee ship, but about as good a Bumblebee song as we shippers could have asked for. To explain why, I'm going to dive deep and go through the lyrics, examining how they might relate to Blake, Yang, and RWBY in general, and providing the best analysis I can. Let's begin. The first verse begins with the singer tempting her beloved to a garden for a secret rendezvous. The immediate thing most people will note here is that this does not relate especially well to anything seen in RWBY. I think this one thing is what arms most of those "this is not Bumblebee" theories that you see all over the place. And it is true that we have not yet seen any gardens, well, not the sort that you can actually go to at least, in RWBY. So what then is up with these lyrics? Well, I think there are two possible explanations. The first is that the garden and garden imagery are purely symbolic. The song is called Bumblebee, bees pollinate flowers. There's a connection there. Flower gardens also show up with some real frequency in manga and anime of the yuri genre, works depicting lesbian romance. A secret meeting between lovers in a garden of flowers in fact feels rather like a situation ripped straight from a yuri manga. Trust me, I know. The purpose of the garden here could just be to emphasize the gayness of the song. Then there's the other possibility. This garden is a real place in Remnant, just one we haven't seen yet. Now you might be saying, oh well sure, but isn't that just kind of a stab in the dark? And while yeah, kind of, I do have no idea what is going to happen after all, there are at least some things that might suggest this could be the case. Gardens have flowers, and where in RWBY have flowers come into play in a significant way recently? The name scheme for the villages in Mistral. Every village visited in Volume 4 was named with a Japanese flower name. Onayuri means tiger lily, Higanbana means red spider lily, and so on. And each of these village names has another meaning as per the language of flowers, which is just this thing where different flowers symbolize different concepts and sentiments. Fans in Volume 4 were pretty quick to figure out that it was these meanings by which the writers were choosing the names for the villages. Shion means remembrance, the name of the episode where it appears. Kuroyuri means both love and curse, both of which can apply to what Rin found there. Higanbana, the setting for our first real taste of Raven, means abandonment. Now, where am I going with this? Well, there is one Mistral village that was named but hasn't yet been featured. Kuchinashi. This name translates to gardenia, which on its own is interesting enough. Garden, gardenia, something at least. But its meaning in the language of flowers? Secret love. Now, it could just be coincidence, but we have a song describing a secret romance in a garden, and we have a yet to be used location with a name meaning secret love. And every other similar location's meaning has been immediately relevant to the events that happened there. And what else do we know about Kuchinashi? It's on the sign Team Ranger encounters at the Fork, in the same direction as Mistral. This implies it's close to Mistral, probably just one village over. And from what Crow says in the world of Remnant for Mistral, we know it's a place away from the eyes of the Mistral Council. Now, I don't know about you, but to me this sounds like the perfect place for a criminal enterprise looking to cause trouble in Mistral like the White Fang to make their plans. And if Adam is seen there, it will very likely draw out both Blake and Yang, whom Armed and Ready made pretty clear is looking for revenge after what happened to her. It all seems plausible enough, and the fact that this song was written between volumes, when much for Volume 5 has already likely been finalized, probably increases the chance that it could be referring to something upcoming. Also, I'm just really not sure what else Secret Love could end up referring to, or how else it could come into play. And again to emphasize, all other such village namings have been tied directly to what ends up happening there. But I digress, let's get back to the song. There isn't much else of immediate interest with the opening lines. The idea that the meeting between the two has to be kept secret is perhaps an odd one, though it could just be for a want of privacy, not a fear of judgment. The third line sets the scene on a sunny spring day, but despite the symbolic importance of seasons in RWBY, I don't quite get the relevance here, other than just to evoke pleasantness. With the final line, one thing to note is the use of the verb be, which can be taken as a pun in a song called Bumblebee, and is used liberally in the chorus of the song later on. This is only significant, of course, because of the association between Yang and puns. The next few lines are again kinda mysterious. Our young lovers are alone without anyone, but they are being watched by butterflies and birds. Butterflies and birds who recognize what is happening and are happy with what they see. And the fact that actual birds and butterflies generally don't care about such things, and that a third of the verse is spent on this, does warrant it a symbolic reading. I've heard some people theorize that the birds and butterflies are in fact the fans, the shippers who support the two, and this is a possibility. They watch us and they know is a pretty good description of Bumblebee shippers, looking at the subtle details and hints we're given and proclaiming, "I see what you did there." But keeping their secret and not saying a word about the relationship, yeah, that's pretty much the opposite of most Bumblebee shippers I've met, so I'm not entirely convinced, especially since birds are such a potent symbol within RWBY itself. I still ultimately like the initial theory I had for this segment best, that this part refers to their closest friends, Weiss and RWBY. I don't believe Weiss has yet been directly correlated with a butterfly, but she did have a scene with a caterpillar, and in animation such a detail would be deliberately chosen. Rooster Teeth had to design and animate this caterpillar specifically for this scene. Intended symbolism seems likely, and it's easy to see how a butterfly is a good symbol for Weiss. She's vaguely unpleasant and naive to the world when we first meet her, but spends the first 3 volumes inching along, making steady progress. Then she is confined, cocooned if you will, until finally she breaks free, flying over the horizon, ready to find her own path. As for birds and RWBY, admittedly it's a bit more of a stretch. Unless you believe certain theories, RWBY does not have the Bronwyn blood like Yang does. She is Crow's student though. He taught her to fight. As a huntress, she clearly patterns herself after him. So in that way, it kind of works. The birds could also actually just be Raven and or Crow, I guess, but that seems kinda doubtful, especially on Raven's end. The only other interesting thing with this section of the song is another possible pun, this time with the word grow, because gardens are places where plants are nurtured to grow. This lyric thereby correlates their deepening love with the flowers growing in the garden. The final portion of the first verse has it move from setting the scene to describing what happens between the girls. They sit together, the singer's love smiles at her, and she is elated. And once more I focus in on the phrasing. The lyrics "I drink in your smile and my heart fills with love" seem correlated with their use of rather playful, figurative language, drinking your fill and all. The use of the word buzz is also easy to take as a bee pun given the bee motif for the song overall. With this and the puns earlier, the singer for the first verse being Yang becomes increasingly likely. We then reach the chorus and the puns only continue. The verb be again appears, this time in 4 different lines. Be with me, be my queen, be your dream, and be your bumblebee. Be My Queen is of particular note, and not only because with its use of the gendered word queen, this is the one line in the song making it pretty explicit the female singer is singing to another woman, but also because queen is yet another pun. Bees have queens. Considering the devotions bees have for their queens, it's actually a really nice, sweet line. And the final line, "Let me be your bumblebee," is also another one that rather stands out. Given Bumblebee as the canon name for Yang and Blake's team attack, thus refers to the combination of the two, this is the most overt reference to them both in the song. It's also potentially a rather suggestive joke. The most innocent way to read it is just as a follow-up to the "Be My Queen" line. You be my queen, I'll be your devoted little bumblebee. However, the singer, who for the chorus still seems to be Yang, given the extensive mentions of gardens and flowers, could also be saying, "Let me pollinate you." Or alternatively, considering the name of her motorcycle is also Bumblebee, "Ride me." Personally, I prefer the latter interpretation. That possible lewdness aside, the chorus, though passionate, is also notably tentative. Every line here save the last one and one other is either a question or contains the word could. You could be with me suggests that despite the depth of the feelings here, the two are not actually together. The other lyrics suggest that the singer is hoping that the object of her affection notices how perfect they would be together. Maybe Set Me Free implies she's waiting on her to act. Sitting together and smiling, I suppose, is as far as it's gotten. And to me at least, this really fits perfectly with how I see the relationship between Yang and Blake, both because it hasn't to this point come out to the open in any real way, and also because this fits with where I see the characters coming from. Because to me, Yang just really comes across as someone who doesn't quite understand herself sexually, who doesn't have everything sorted out just yet, or at the very least is afraid to act on her feelings. Now that may seem wrong to some of you. She's the sexy one. She struts around in her tight, low-cut tops and flirts and teases her enemies before introducing them to her fists. The thing is, she only really acts sexy and flirty with her enemies. And, well, Blake that one time, but that was a bit different. She uses her sexuality as a weapon. In her daily life, she's playful, but more in an innocent, childish way. And when it comes to her actually displaying sexual attraction, all we get is her leering non-specifically at groups of boys from across the hall, and hanging up posters of boy bands, both of which speak to a more juvenile mindset for such things and don't carry much weight. She has never had an actual defined love interest or even shown the slightest interest in anyone individually, again other than Blake that one time. Even at the dance, we see Weiss chatting up some random guy before Neptune even gets to her, but Yang, she is only shown dancing with Blake. Some of you might be saying, well, what about RWBY? She doesn't have a love interest either, she didn't dance with anyone. And well, yes, that is true, RWBY is a bit different. She's 2 years younger than everyone she knows, and she acts even younger than that. She's also socially awkward, freely admitting she prefers weapons to people. Her not having a boyfriend makes all the sense in the world. Yang is an extrovert though, a social butterfly, a thrill seeker. Her not having anyone is much more conspicuous. And it's even more so when you consider how she reacts when confronted by sexuality from others at times. Consider the scene with Port in Volume 1. With how it plays out, some interpret this scene as him actually hitting on her, but no, that doesn't fit Port's character at all. He's just making a lame, boastful joke about how he's such a ladies' man to the entire class. It's Yang who decides to take it personally, and it makes her uncomfortable. Similarly, in Volume 3, Yang is shown to have little patience for her uncle being a perv. Then there's the fight with Neon, where we see that Yang is actually quite insecure about the body it otherwise seems like she likes to flaunt. And in that fight, and the fight with Neo, we also see that she is quite susceptible to the same sort of playful, winking taunts she herself employs, and when it's coming from other women no less. To me, it all speaks to a lot of projection hiding an actual lack of confidence in this aspect of herself. Blake is an entirely different story. She's had at least one prior serious romantic relationship, and she spends her time reading what we can assume from the blush to be somewhat saucy and scandalous romance novels. She likely has a much better idea of what she likes and what she wants. Her issue is just trust. Because of what happened with Adam, she has become hesitant to get too close with anyone, whatever she might feel. And considering all that, this chorus is perfect. Unsure Yang, unable or unwilling to make the move and act on her own feelings, waits with longing for the hesitant Blake to act, to finally see how good it could be, to let her in and set her free. In fact, it kinda mirrors how the most direct Bumblebee moment in the entire series to this point played out. Rather than Yang saying anything about how she felt towards Blake or even directly asking for a dance, she prompted Blake to consider how she felt about her, made a pun about Blake coming out, and left the dance in Blake's hands, if she felt like it. Moving on to the second verse, the opening line here represents something of a shift. Now the flowers are in bloom. The first verse and the chorus were punny yet direct. There's a garden, butterflies and birds watch, we sit, you smile. This just seems much more literary, metaphorical. As for meaning, I would hazard a guess that just as the love took the place of the flowers in the earlier pun, the flowers now symbolize their blossoming love here. Then we have what is probably the single most telling line in the entire song. Darkness and gloom are both very much words evocative of Blake and not many other characters. Darkness is her motif. She is the one who descends from shadows. And gloomy, I think, is a word that has only ever been used to describe her in RWBY. Moreover, you've chased away my darkness and gloom. If it is Blake, immediately evokes the most memorable scene between Blake and Yang in the entire series, and how Yang, with a single talk, took Blake from this to this. Though it also just works in a general sense. She was cold and moody when she first arrived at Beacon, but Yang started to draw smiles after they partnered, and Blake rather quickly became a lot more friendly and open. And this line doesn't really work from Yang's perspective. There has not been a scene where she has been shown to be upset and Blake has made it better. Considering in fact that it could be argued Blake has only ever brought more darkness to Yang's life, this I think makes it pretty certain that the second verse is indeed from Blake's point of view. The third and fourth lines then are a flowery simile, which together with that first poetic line serve to reiterate this. This kind of language makes much more sense coming from the bookish Blake than it does Yang, and just feels worlds apart from how the first verse and the chorus were written. The verse then returns to the earlier idea that the singer's beloved makes things better for her, that she drives away the bad, this time specifically her doubts. Now this again really seems to evoke how the relationship seems to work on Blake's end, as Yang has a habit, most cleanly observed in the Mountain Glen arc, of chiming in with reassurances towards Blake, supporting her, telling her things will be okay. And while it doesn't always seem like Blake listens, I'm sure it's still something she appreciates. It's easy to see Yang as a comforting presence in her life. The following line reiterates this same theme yet again, only this time via metaphor. And the metaphor used, the sky being cleared of clouds, is a particularly apt one if it's about Yang, because what is left when the sky clears but a sunny day? And sunniness, of course, invokes our sunny little dragon. With the last few lines of the verse, things shift gears quite considerably for the most explicit lines in the song. Well, aside from the Bumblebee line, possibly, if you want to interpret it that way. This is unambiguous, though, and it suggests that Blake actively anticipates, or more likely given the yet-to-be-realized nature of the chorus, daydreams about Yang kissing her, something I'm sure the Black Sun shippers are quite happy with. And really, this actually fits pretty well with what I was saying about the two before. For the more innocent Yang, sitting with Blake, seeing her smile, that is enough to satisfy her. Blake, who has been in relationships and is a lot more mature in that regard, needs a little more to do it for her though. The sheer romanticism of it also does bring to mind someone who is into romance novels. We then have our second chorus, and it's the same until the end. The way it does end, however, cutting off before the final word, is worth noting. It cuts off, and then the transition from chorus to bridge is quite abrupt. This, along with closer examination of the rest rest of the lyrics is what ultimately convinced me that yes, this song is a duet with two distinct points of view going on, as opposed to a song just from Blake's perspective. Because if it was just one singer, why would it be written in a way that implies she's cutting herself off, interrupting one thought to begin another? It just wouldn't be a natural progression. Now, onto the bridge, which has some of the most interesting yet hardest to attribute lyrics. When I first started to seriously look at this song as a duet, I was inclined to agree with how Flint of RWBY Nation drew up the bridge in his popular lyric video for the song. After thinking it through a bit more though, I've reached a much different conclusion. The bridge is comprised of a pair of similes and then two more lines. The first simile is much more elaborate and literary in nature and also on its face romantic, much like the lyrics in the Blake verse. It also kind of fits things on Blake's end more because Blake is generally pretty quiet. I don't really think Blake's words is what Yang would focus in on. On the other hand, Blake has a real habit of smiling at things Yang says and does. It's a little easier for me to see her being serenaded by Yang's words than the other way around, especially since earlier in the song, in another simile, she compared Yang's voice to a song on the breeze. And yeah, then there's just the fact that the chorus is Yang, so if we're cutting in with a new perspective to start the bridge, this would have to be Blake by default. As for the second simile, this one took me a while to sort out. For starters, purty beat? What is that? At first I thought it was purty, a corruption of the word pretty that some people use, though that would be kind of odd given the beat is rarely the part of the song people consider to be pretty. Then I thought it was party beat, which yeah, would have made a lot of sense, but no, it's Purdy, and it turns out Purdy is a man's name, Bernard Purdy, an influential drummer in the funk music world, most known for the Purdy Shuffle, a drum beat that sounds like this. And once I knew this, I was absolutely convinced that this was a Blake line. Yang is the only one of the two that can reasonably be compared to an intense drum beat like that after all, right? But yeah, no. It turns out I was just not reading the simile right. The singer is not comparing her love to a drum beat. She's saying she's sweet. Sweet like a sweet beat. It's a pun. This is totally 100% Yang. Possibly the yangiest line in the entire song. I don't know how I missed it. Was I really to believe Blake would know enough about specific drum beats to compare Yang to one? And the great thing is, with this being Yang, there is possibly another pun here that maybe explains the weird choice of the whole Purdy detail. Because Purdy. Yeah, potentially a cat pun for Blake. Admittedly not a very sure or clear one, but hey, it's on the same level as some of the puns she tells in Chibi at least. But what about the last two lines? Who is singing those? I wasn't so sure at first, but then I realized something. Both of these lines contain two very separate, unrelated thoughts. Every day is sunny, tastes like honey. Feel so alive, take me back to the hive. I got to thinking, what if these lines are split and this is sort of like a call and response section going back and forth between the two? And yeah, it totally works. Every day is sunny is a line to be said about Yang, not Blake. Again, sunny little dragon. This is what her name means, and this is again reiterating the overall theme of the Blake verse. Yang brightens her life. Tastes like honey, meanwhile, is another bee joke. It also seems to relate back to the line before every day is sunny, adding a third meaning to the pun. Sweet beat, sweet girl, sweet honey. It does make you wonder what exactly tastes like honey though. Maybe Yang isn't as innocent as I thought. Then we have Feel So Alive. This seems like more Blake again, touching on what most of her parts do, how Yang gives her life. And finally, it's back to the hive for another silly bee line from Yang. And that's the last new lyric. The final chorus then comes after the solo, and it's the same as the first. So there we have it. This song is a hugely implicit, unabashedly romantic duet between Blake and Yang. While the first two-thirds of the first verse remain a little cryptic to me, everything else in the song seems to line up with my understanding of the characters and their relationships impeccably well. And it's amazing. Jeff and Casey Williams deserve all credit for gifting us with something so exciting and beautiful. I hope you enjoyed this lengthy analysis and look forward to more RWBY content in the future. Until then, see you next time.